Welcome to California in Focus. I'm Johnny Edwards, the Southeast investigative reporter for the Center Square. I'm joined by Madeline Shannon, who covers California's state and local government for the Center Square. Maddie has an exclusive story about a nonpartisan state legislative analyst that's calling out Governor Gavin Newsom for some rather rosy budget projections, saying that the actual budget picture is, quote, alarming. And the story is alarming. Maddie, what is Governor Newsom saying about the California budget? And tell us about this analyst agency that's taking issue with it.
So Governor Newsom is projecting a much better economy this year nationally and in terms of the state's economy than the Legislative Analyst's Office predicted in its November report. In November, the Legislative Analyst's Office, which advances budget solutions for the state legislature, among other things, released their report outlining an $18 billion budget gap going into this year and into next year as well. And they say that that $18 billion budget gap is fueled mostly by funding obligations to K through 12 education and higher education, as well as obligations to the state's rainy day fund. And Governor Newsom simply put forth a budget that seems to disagree with the Legislative Analyst's Office report. Since he predicts a much better economy and much higher revenues coming to the state because of high big tech company valuations, he's expecting bigger revenues, a better economy, and a stable stock market, which is ultimately going to benefit the state's finances, and resulted in his budget proposal outlining only a $3 billion budget deficit, not the $18 billion that the Legislative Analyst's Office predicted a couple months ago.
Wow, but how can there be such a wide gap, such a huge chasm, a $15 billion difference, I believe, between what the governor is saying and what this office is saying? How can it be that much?
Well, the Legislative Analyst's Office predicted the stock market would be more volatile this year, or it could be more volatile this year than what Newsom is predicting. And they're also predicting that high AI company valuations, most of which are headquartered here in California for those companies, that those revenues coming to the state might not be something the state can depend on as much as they have been in the last few years. It seems that AI company valuations have been so high in recent years that it's resulted in high revenues to the state. So it's really benefited the state financially to have these AI companies that are headquartered here be evaluated so high and be able to pay so much in corporate income tax. But that might not be a source of revenue that the state can count on depending on in the coming year if the stock market is more volatile than what Newsom is predicting. So ultimately, that's one of the biggest reasons for why that $15 billion gap between what the Legislative Analyst's Office predicted in November and what Governor Newsom is predicting in his budget deficit or budget proposal.
Well, does Governor Newsom's outlook, does that indicate that he actually has a positive outlook on the direction the country's going in right now?
I think he does. It certainly seems that the budget proposal that he put forth on Friday of last week predicts a rosier economy than what the Legislative Analyst's Office predicted. And whether he is working off of information that shows that his rosy outlook is justified or this is just wishful thinking, that remains to be seen this year.
Can you imagine this coming up if he were to run for president, make a serious run for president, that he's, seems to be saying that the country's head the right way?
Yeah, it certainly seems so. I know that he's been very critical of the Trump administration cutting funding to various programs that the state administers and counts on federal funding for. But ultimately, I think that Governor Newsom is optimistic about the state of the economy and the direction that the country is going in. And I do think that this is something that could come up if he were to run for president. And of course, we all know that he is widely expected to announce his candidacy after the midterm elections this coming November.
Absolutely. Now about this wide disagreement, should taxpayers be concerned about this? What is the impact potentially to California taxpayers?
Well, so far, it doesn't seem that this budget proposal, either on Governor Newsom's part or the Legislative Analyst Office part. It doesn't seem that that's going to raise taxes any. It doesn't seem that income taxes are going to go up. It doesn't seem that sales tax or other taxes that California residents pay are going to go up because of either of these proposals. But if the Legislative Analyst's Office is right, and we do see an $18 billion budget deficit or more, then there will certainly be impacts to the cost of living and just how much things cost in California that all California residents might have to grapple with. But hopefully going into this year, going into the rest of this year and into next year, we don't see a budget deficit that's quite as high as what the Legislative Analyst's Office predicted.
I see. And these budget deficits are certainly nothing new to California. I mean, I can remember them going back to the days of Schwarzenegger. How does California typically deal with its budget deficits?
It seems that the legislature has crafted budgets in the last several years that seems to close the budget gap somewhat from year to year. But right now, in particular, it does seem that there is a sense of Governor Newsom kicking the can down the road in his budget proposal. But ultimately, it's not really up to the governor or the governor's office to craft the budget for the state. Now the ball is in the legislature's court. So those who sit on budget-related committees in the state assembly and the state senate, they're going to craft a budget now into the spring months. So we'll see what they come up with and if they side with the Legislative Analyst's Office outlook or Governor Newsom's rosier outlook.
Is there anything notable or interesting that the legislative analyst is specifically recommending be done?
Well, that's a good question. They do have a number of recommendations, and mostly it all ties back to finding ways to close the budget gap. I think that they want to see the legislature put together a budget that would cut down on expenses and find ways to expand revenues and find ways to attract more revenue, but they don't make policy recommendations really. So while they do make recommendations in their budget report, they don't really make decisions or push the legislature to make any one decision over another. But ultimately, they want to see expenses go down and revenues go up.
So it's kind of like sounding the alarm rather than offering the solution.
Right. Mm-hmm.
I see. Well, you touched on this a little bit earlier, but tell us more about the role that artificial intelligence technology is playing into this. I mean, how much is California's budget and economic outlook depending on the future of AI?
Well, there's a lot of big tech companies that are invested in AI pretty heavily. And those companies, of course, have generated a lot of revenue for the state in corporate income tax. And the companies that are publicly traded have been really successful in being successful on the stock market. And that's been good economically and financially for the state of California. And the state has been reliant on high budget valuations or high corporate valuations on those companies to continue so that they can expect that revenue that they've been getting from those companies in the last several years. But if the stock market is volatile this year, that might negatively impact the valuations of those companies. And that ultimately would hurt the state if it were continuing to, if the legislature decided to be heavily reliant still on high corporate revenues, tax revenues coming from those companies that would support the budget.
I see. Wow. Well, thanks a lot, Maddie. This is great work, and there's definitely a lot at stake here. Folks, you can catch her story posted at thecentersquare.com. This has been California in Focus. I'm Johnny Edwards, and thank you very much for joining us.